A young girl named Ella hears strange clicks behind a portrait in a grand old mansion, and what she uncovers shakes an entire family legacy. A secret room, a buried skeleton, a forgotten murder. Ella refuses to stay silent, and her courage uncovers a century-old injustice no one dared to face. This isn't just a mystery. It's a story of truth, legacy, and the quiet strength of a child who dared to listen when others ignored. Where are you watching from? Drop your city below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories like this. The first thing Ella Monroe noticed about the Everett estate was how quiet it was. Not just the absence of sound, but a quiet that seemed to press in from every direction. The kind of quiet that felt deliberate, intentional, like the house was holding its breath, waiting to see what kind of girl had just stepped through its century-old doors. It had been a week since she arrived, adopted by Julian Everett, a man whose wealth had been whispered about in headlines, but whose heart Ella still wasn't sure of. He was kind in a practiced way, always polite, always precise. Like someone who'd read a manual on how to care for a child and followed it with meticulous professionalism. She didn't dislike him, but she didn't trust him either. Not yet. The estate itself was enormous, the kind of place that felt more like a museum than a home, with corridors that stretched like they'd never end, and doors that opened to rooms still covered in white sheets, as though the furniture beneath them was sleeping. Ella had counted 4 fireplaces on the first day and discovered 2 staircases she hadn't known existed on the third. The third night, she'd gotten lost on her way back from the bathroom and had to follow the moonlight filtering through stained glass windows just to find her way to bed. But despite all that, the grandeur, the mystery, there was one room that called to her more than any other, the library. She'd found it entirely by accident. The door was partially open, and curiosity led her inside. And then, she never wanted to leave. Towering bookshelves lined every wall, stretching nearly to the cathedral ceiling. A rolling ladder whispered across the old wood as if it still remembered being used often. In the center, a massive leather chair, cracked with age, deep enough to disappear into, sat beside a reading lamp whose light cast soft halos across the dark carpet. She curled into that chair like a cat in sunlight and breathed for the first time since she arrived. And that's when she met Miss Iris Holloway. "Don't let the books intimidate you," the older woman said, appearing so quietly, Ella had jumped. She wore a soft gray cardigan and a silver pendant in the shape of an hourglass. Her white hair was pinned with precise elegance, and her eyes had a quiet gravity, like someone who'd seen far more than she let on. "I'm not intimidated," Ella said, her voice sharper than she intended. She'd learned to mask uncertainty with bravado. Iris only smiled. "Of course not." From that moment, Ella trusted her. It wasn't a choice, it was instinct. Iris didn't speak to her like a charity case. She didn't ask if she liked her new room or call her sweetheart the way Julian sometimes did with careful distance. She asked what kind of books she liked and handed her a weathered copy of The Secret Garden without a single comment about it being a classic. The library became Ella's domain. Every afternoon while Julian handled business in his home office and the renovation crew installed smart lighting and new marble countertops in the kitchen, Ella escaped into stories where children were clever and brave and not at all helpless. She curled up in that enormous chair, tucking her knees beneath her, invisible but watching. Always watching. The painting above the fireplace caught her attention on the second day. A tall man with pale eyes and a stern jaw gazed out across the room, one hand resting on a polished globe, the other holding a closed book. The nameplate read, Bartholomew Everett, 1872 to 1931. Julian's great-grandfather. But it wasn't the man that held her gaze, it was the frame. Thick, gilded, and slightly uneven, it gave the impression that something lay beneath it, or behind it. Once, in the slanted light of late afternoon, she thought she saw a flicker. A movement that didn't belong to shadow or light, just a brief suggestion of something shifting behind the canvas. She kept that to herself. That same day, while Iris dusted the lawn windowsills, she shared, almost casually, "This house is over 120 years old. Bartholomew built it himself. He designed the library first, said the rest of the house could wait, but the books couldn't." Ella liked that. She liked the idea of someone building a room just for stories. Later that evening, when the sky turned indigo and the house began its nighttime murmurings, Ella sat in the library with her head buried in a book about a girl who could talk to animals. Then it happened. A sound. Click. Soft, mechanical, deliberate. She sat up, the book sliding off her lap. The noise had come from the wall behind the painting, or near it. Not the house settling, not pipes clanking or wind against the windows. This was different, purposeful. Ella stood, barefoot on the rug, and crept toward the painting. Her hand touched the frame, cold, still. Then, again, click. She pressed her ear to the wall. There it was, rhythmic, measured. A lock? A mechanism. "Iris," she whispered. The woman was arranging a stack of books nearby. She turned, immediately alert. "Yes? Can walls have locks?" Iris's face changed. Color drained from her cheeks. Her eyes locked onto Ella's. "Why do you ask?" "I heard something, like a click, like something opening." For a moment, Iris looked as though she might lie, but she didn't. She set the books down carefully and came to stand beside her. Together, they stared at the painting. Julian's voice called suddenly from the hall. "Ella?" He entered, his suit slightly rumpled, tie undone for once, eyes sharp with, was it concern or fear? "What are you doing in here?" he asked, more sharply than usual. "There's something behind the painting," Ella said quietly. Julian paused. He glanced at Iris, who gave a slight nod. Then he sighed, as if something heavy had just shifted inside him. "Help me," he said. Together, he and Iris lifted the painting off its mount. It was heavier than it looked, and the dust behind it was undisturbed, except for the edges near the floor. Something had been moved recently. Behind the painting was not just a wall, it was a door, wooden, dark, with an old brass handle that gleamed with recent use. There was no dust, no cobwebs, no signs of abandonment. The handle looked polished. Ella's breath caught. Julian touched the handle, then hesitated. "This isn't in any of the house plans," he said. "It wouldn't be," Iris replied softly. "They didn't open it that night. Instead, Julian called his lawyers, the county architects, but no one could explain the presence of the door." Over the next few days, Ella began hearing more. Footsteps at night, the quiet click of the door's latch when no one else was nearby. The house was whispering to her, and Ella, who had spent most of her life learning how to hear what others ignored, listened. She didn't trust easily, but she trusted her instincts. And the door was not done speaking. Julian Everett stood in front of the sealed door, his arms folded, face unreadable. Morning light poured into the library through tall windows, illuminating the dust still swirling from where the painting had hung. Ella watched him from the corner, her back pressed against the big leather chair, her breath shallow. She didn't trust the silence. Not from the house, and not from him. He ran a hand through his neatly combed hair, something she'd never seen him do before, and turned to Iris. "Are you absolutely sure you've never seen this before?" Iris Holloway, who had worked in the Everett house for over 4 decades, kept her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her eyes didn't waver. "I was told this room had no basement, that Bartholomew Everett had it bricked up during renovations in 1935, after an incident." "What kind of incident?" "I was never told, but I never saw blueprints that included this." Julian exhaled slowly. "And yet here it is." He turned back to the door, reaching for the brass handle. Ella's heart leapt to her throat. She half expected something monstrous to claw its way out the moment he turned it, but it didn't budge. "No use," Julian muttered. "It's locked from the inside, or maybe it's stuck. I'll have the contractors look at it once the dust settles." He turned to go, brushing off the discovery as casually as if they'd found a hidden closet, not a sealed stone passage in a 100-year-old house. "Wait," Ella jumped up before she could stop herself. "We can't just leave it." Julian gave her a look, polite, paternal, firm. "Ella, I understand this is exciting for you, but this isn't a storybook. We don't open unknown doors in old houses. There are safety concerns, structural ones, mold, asbestos. God knows what's behind there. We'll investigate properly. But that's enough." He walked out without waiting for her response, leaving behind the stillness and the door that hummed with secrets. Iris stayed behind, her hands still clenched. "He's scared," she said softly. "Not of what's inside, maybe, but of what it might unravel." Ella didn't reply. She was already staring at the door again, her mind racing. That night she couldn't sleep. The house made too many noises. The wind whispered against the high windows, floorboards creaked under footsteps that didn't belong to her, and always, always, that steady, rhythmic click. It didn't come every night, but tonight it did. 2 short clicks like a lock being tested. Ella sat up, holding her breath. She tiptoed down the hallway, careful to avoid the loose boards that groaned under weight. At the library door, she pressed her ear against the wood. Silence. But the scent of something unfamiliar drifted under the crack of the door. Dust, yes, and something faintly metallic. Ella reached for the doorknob. A sudden voice made her jump. Couldn't sleep? Julian stood behind her, arms crossed, face unreadable again, but this time softer. Ella turned, embarrassed and a little frightened. I heard something, she said quietly. Julian nodded. This house does that. It remembers. He opened the door for her, and they stepped inside together. In the dim glow of the hallway light, the door behind the painting loomed darker than ever. Julian looked at her for a long moment. Let me show you something. He crossed the room to the desk and pulled out a flat leather folder. Inside were photocopies of the original house blueprints, yellowed and brittle. This is what the county had on file. As you can see, no door, no stairs, just a solid wall. He traced his finger along the lines. But you and Iris were right. Something's off. Ella leaned over the desk. She squinted. Look here, she said, pointing to a faint outline, barely visible under the newer lines. That looks like a stairwell. Julian stared. You've got sharp eyes. He didn't say anything else, but she could see the gears turning behind his tired eyes. The next morning, Bianca Reed returned. She breezed into the foyer with a tablet in one hand, sunglasses perched atop her sleek blonde hair, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Julian, she sang, I just wanted to follow up on the lighting plan in the East Wing. We may need to adjust the cable routing. Ella watched from the stairs, hidden by the carved wooden railing. Julian met her in the library. Ella crept down silently, crouching just outside the door. I found something last night, he was saying. A door, hidden behind the painting. Oh, Bianca's voice tightened almost imperceptibly. That's interesting. Julian seemed not to notice. I'll need to put the restoration of that area on hold until we figure out what's back there. There was a pause. Of course, Bianca said sweetly. Safety first, but if you'd like, I could take a look. Might be useful to have an architect's eye. Ella didn't like the way Bianca said that. She backed away before they could catch her listening. Her heart was hammering. Bianca hadn't seemed surprised, not even a little. That evening, Ella brought her suspicion to Iris. She already knew, Ella whispered, about the door. She pretended to be curious, but she wasn't. Iris's face darkened. I've had my concerns about that woman since she first walked in with her white gloves and her perfect questions. What do you mean? She's too interested in things that don't matter to renovations. Family portraits, heirlooms. She even asked to catalog the antique lockboxes in the study. Who does that? Ella thought for a moment, then said, someone looking for something. Later that night, she found Julian in the library again, staring at the sealed door. Can we try to open it? He hesitated. I don't think that's wise, not yet. Why not? He looked down at her. Because you're a child. Her stomach twisted. She hated that answer more than any other. I'm not making things up, she said. I didn't say you were. You don't have to, she replied. He sighed and turned away. We'll investigate in time. For now, just be careful. Ella wanted to scream, but she didn't. She was tired of adults making her voice small. That night, she lay in bed, seething, staring at the ceiling, and then soft footsteps in the hallway. Not Julian's. Too light, too quick. The sound of someone who didn't want to be noticed. She slipped from bed and followed, heart racing. The light under the library door was on, and then a whisper. Not Julian. Not Iris. A woman's voice. Bianca. Ella crept closer, careful not to breathe too loudly. Yes, Bianca was saying into her phone. Still locked, but it's real. The girl found it, which means the vault is still there. Ella's breath caught. I'll have access soon, Bianca continued. The blueprint matches. Everything's in place. Once I get inside, the documents are mine. A pause. Yes, originals. If they're intact, they're worth a fortune. The Everett estate doesn't even know what it's sitting on. The kid's the only wild card. Another pause. No, she's 9. Nobody listens to orphans. Ella backed away slowly, her blood running cold. She didn't wait to hear more. The next day, she told Julian everything. but he didn't believe her. He smiled too gently. "Ella, that's a serious accusation. I heard her. She said she was going to steal something. I think maybe you misunderstood. Renovations can sound suspicious if you only hear part of the plan. I heard her say it. She said nobody listens to orphans." His face changed then, just slightly, like something in him shifted, but not enough. "Sweetheart," he said softly, "you've been through a lot. Sometimes our minds protect us by creating stories. It's normal." She clenched her fists. "It's not a story." But he had already looked away. That night, she didn't sleep at all, because the house wasn't making random noises anymore. Now it was whispering her name. The next morning dawned with a golden haze, sunlight filtering through the lace curtains in Ella's room, like threads of warmth trying to soften the edges of her unease. But she didn't feel warm. She felt like she was living in a box of shadows, her voice bouncing off the walls unheard. Julian hadn't brought up their conversation from the night before, and at breakfast he seemed more focused on an upcoming investor meeting than on the fact that someone might be plotting a theft in his own home. "I'll be in the study most of the day," he said, barely looking up from his tablet. "Bianca's stopping by to go over the updated floor plans." Ella's spoon paused midair. "Again?" Julian glanced at her. "Yes, she's thorough." Thorough. That was one way to describe someone who had referred to her as a wild card and dismissed her as an orphan no one would believe. Ella pushed her cereal bowl away, appetite gone. Later that morning, she retreated to the library. It was her safe place, or had been. Now it felt like something was watching her from every corner, breathing down her neck. The sealed door remained as still as ever, the brass handle catching the light like it had secrets to whisper. She sat in the big leather chair, knees tucked under her chin, and stared at the door. How could something so silent make so much noise inside her head? Iris found her there. "You're worried," Iris said, her voice as gentle as the rustle of book pages. "She's lying to him," Ella said, no longer needing to explain who she was. "I heard her." "I believe you," Iris said simply, and those words wrapped around Ella like a blanket she didn't know she needed. "But belief isn't always enough. We need something more." "Proof," Ella said. "That's what Julian said too, that I was just imagining things. Adults love logic. They build walls with it. We'll just have to find a way through." Ella nodded slowly, determination replacing the helplessness in her chest. She wasn't going to let Bianca steal from Julian. She wasn't going to let anyone erase the truth again. It started with watching. She noticed things, small things that didn't seem important until she strung them together like beads on a wire. Bianca's visits were growing more frequent. She always arrived with a reason. A new measurement to double-check, an electrical line that needed rerouting, but her eyes never stopped moving. They slid over walls, lingered on locked cabinets, paused at portraits like she was piecing together a treasure map only she could read. Ella began writing everything down in a little notebook Iris had given her. Dates, times, questions Bianca asked, which rooms she spent the most time in. Ella didn't understand it all yet, but she knew enough to recognize patterns. And Bianca was a pattern disguised as a person, beautiful, calculated, precise. One afternoon, she followed Bianca quietly after Julian had gone upstairs for a call. Bianca didn't go to the study like she said she would. Instead, she slipped into the hallway that led toward the guest bedrooms. Rooms still under renovation. Ella waited until she heard the soft click of a door and crept after her. She found the door slightly ajar. Inside, Bianca knelt by the wall, her back to the door. Ella could see something small and metallic in her hand. A screwdriver? A panel was open. Wiring spilled out like veins from a wound. Ella froze, heart pounding. She pulled back before Bianca could notice and ran down the hallway, not stopping until she was in the kitchen, pretending to inspect the fruit bowl when Iris walked in. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Iris said, raising an eyebrow. "I think she's tampering with the wiring," Ella whispered, still catching her breath. "She was in the guest wing, pulling wires out of the wall." Iris frowned. "Julian had those circuits secured last week. We need help," Ella said. "Someone who can prove what she's doing." That help came sooner than she expected. The next day, Julian introduced Ella to a visitor. "Ella, this is Dev," he said. "He's going to be updating our security system. I thought you might be interested in how it works." Dev Patel was younger than Julian, maybe in his 20s, with kind brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a small silver nose ring. He wore a faded t-shirt under a flannel button-down and smiled like he meant it. "I heard you've got a good head for puzzles," he said to Ella, crouching to meet her eye level. Ella blinked, caught off guard. "I guess so." "Well, this house is full of them," he grinned. "Want to help me look?" Julian left them to it. Dev opened his laptop, connecting to a small tablet. "I'm scanning for unusual signals," he explained. "Sometimes people try to hack systems by hiding transmitters in walls or vents." Ella's pulse quickened. "Could you find something that isn't supposed to be here?" Dev looked intrigued. "Absolutely. Got a hunch?" Ella led him to the library. She didn't say much at first, afraid he'd think she was just another kid with an overactive imagination. But Dev didn't treat her that way. He asked questions like she mattered. When they entered the room, he paused. "This is beautiful," he murmured. "Feels like the kind of place that remembers everything." Ella smiled. "It does." Dev held up his scanner and started walking slowly around the room. The device pinged as it picked up known signals: Julian's Wi-Fi, the house's new smart thermostat, his own laptop. Then, an alert. "Huh," Dev said, frowning. "What is it?" "There's a signal coming from behind this wall." He tapped the panel next to the sealed door. "Something's active back there. Not connected to the main network. Doesn't match anything in Julian's system." Ella's heart leapt. "Can we see what it is?" "Not without opening that door," he said. "But I can tell you this. It's not supposed to be here. Whatever it is, someone planted it." She turned to him, eyes wide. "Will you help me prove it?" Dev looked at her, saw the fire in her expression, the weight of being unheard, and nodded. "Yeah, kid, I will." That evening, Bianca came back. Ella was in the parlor pretending to read, but her ears were trained on every word. "I'd like to inspect the northern corridor tomorrow," Bianca said to Julian. "There may be moisture damage near the baseboards." "You've inspected it twice," Julian said, not coldly but with less patience than usual. Bianca laughed lightly. "Just being thorough." Ella caught the flicker in her eyes when she turned away. That night, Dev returned quietly after dark. Julian had given him full access. "I want to check something before I call it a night," he told Iris as he slipped through the kitchen. Ella met him in the hallway. They entered the library together. Dev's scanner led them straight to the sealed door. He knelt and pulled a small flashlight from his pocket, sweeping it over the wall. "There," he said, pointing. A tiny black disc, no larger than a button, was attached to the molding just beneath the handle. "Bluetooth transmitter," Dev whispered. "State of the art. This thing's been tracking the lock's magnetic pulses. Someone's trying to map the tumblers to crack the mechanism." Ella swallowed. "Bianca? Only someone with regular access could have planted it, and it's been active for days." Dev turned to her. "You were right." She didn't feel victorious. She felt scared. Because Bianca wasn't just curious. She was preparing, and if the door opened, Ella didn't know what she'd find. But she was going to be ready. The next morning arrived with a hush of fog wrapped around the Everett estate like a secret not yet ready to be spoken. The grounds were blanketed in gray, the trees faded outlines against the damp sky, and even the birds seemed reluctant to break the silence. But inside the house, something had shifted. Ella felt it in her bones. The air was tighter, closer, like the walls were holding their breath. Julian was gone for a business meeting in the city, leaving the house unusually quiet. Iris had excused herself early to run errands, and Bianca was supervising the electricians, which meant she was wandering through the house alone again, claiming to inspect work that didn't need inspecting. Ella took her chance. She met Dev in the library just after breakfast. "I got the approval," he said in a whisper, holding up a sleek metal toolkit. "Julian told me I could inspect the door to figure out what kind of locking mechanism we're dealing with." Ella's eyes widened. "He didn't say you could open it, did he?" Dev grinned. "Not exactly, but he said, and I quote, 'Do what you need to secure the house.'" He tilted his head, "And that sounds like permission to me." It took both of them to shift the massive door, but once they revealed the seam again, Dev got to work. He knelt, careful and methodical, examining the frame, the lock, the molding around the handle. "It's a very old system," he murmured, "but someone's been maintaining it. See here?" He pointed to a small discoloration near the hinges. That's fresh oil? And the wear patterns on the handle? Someone's been turning this regularly. Bianca? Ella asked. Dev didn't look up. Almost definitely. This Bluetooth device. He reached into the inside of the doorframe and pulled out the tiny black disc again. It was logging pressure shifts, recording vibrations every time the door moved, even a millimeter. Ella's stomach turned. So she's been testing it for weeks. She's been planning something, Dev said. He worked quickly, his fingers flying over the old brass lock with the confidence of someone who respected secrets, but wasn't afraid to dig them up. After 20 minutes, there was a faint click, deeper and older than the ones Ella had heard before, something ancient shifting. Then the door creaked open. Behind it, a narrow stone staircase descended into the dark, swallowed by shadows. Dev clicked on his flashlight and shone it downward. Dust spiraled in the beam like ghosts made of memory. "After you?" he offered, half joking. Ella took a deep breath and stepped forward. The stone was cold under her bare feet. The walls were rough, carved from the same gray slate that lined the outer foundation. It smelled like time, musty, metallic, a mix of damp earth and forgotten things. Each step they took echoed too loudly. The staircase twisted slightly to the left, disappearing from view until they reached a landing that opened into a small chamber carved directly from the rock. The ceiling was low, the air heavy. In the center of the room sat an old wooden chest, weathered but intact. Its brass corners gleamed under Dev's light, and a complicated lock sat in the center, its keyhole shaped like a star. But it wasn't the chest that made Ella stop breathing. It was the dark stains on the stone floor nearby, dried and faded but unmistakably blood. Dev crouched, his expression serious now. "This isn't recent, but it's real." Ella stepped forward slowly. "Do you think someone died here?" "I don't know," he said. "But if they did, they didn't just fall. Look at the pattern. That's not accidental." They examined the room further. There were no shelves, no furniture, just the chest, the stains, and a sense of grief so thick it pressed against Ella's ribs. It felt like the room itself was remembering. Dev reached for the chest. "I'm not going to force it open. Not yet, but look." He pointed to the lock. "Scratch marks. Fresh. Someone tried to pick this recently." Ella bent down and saw it too, tiny gouges in the metal near the keyhole. "She's been down here, and she's coming back," Dev said grimly. "We need to be ready." Back upstairs, Ella found Iris in the kitchen, her coat dusted with rain. "You found it," Iris said, her voice soft. Ella nodded, her expression solemn. There was blood. Iris's hand stilled on the teacup she was drying. "I feared as much." "You knew?" "I suspected. My grandmother used to talk in half sentences when she thought no one was listening. She said the Everetts had ghosts, but not the kind that haunt, ghosts made of guilt. My grandfather worked for Bartholomew Everett. He helped pour the foundation of this house. He told her something terrible had happened during construction. Then he stopped talking altogether." "Do you think the chest has something to do with it?" "I think the answers are inside. But so is danger. Secrets that are buried that deep don't come up clean." Ella looked up at her. "Will you help me find out what's in it?" Iris met her gaze. "I will." That night, Ella couldn't sleep. The rain had picked up, tapping on the windows like fingernails. She sat by the fire in the library, curled in the big chair watching the doorway. Just after midnight, the house shifted. She felt it more than heard it. Then, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, quick, light, and too careful. She crept to the door and peered into the hallway. A shadow moved past the far end, toward the eastern staircase. Bianca. Ella waited, counted to 30, then followed. She moved silently, barefoot on the old rugs, down the stairs and into the hallway that led toward the library. The door stood slightly ajar. Inside, she could see the glow of a flashlight beam bouncing off the walls. Ella pressed herself against the frame and listened. "She's too close," Bianca was saying, her voice low but sharp. "If I don't get into the chest soon, the kid's going to figure it out. Yes, I have the tools. Yes, I have the blueprint. I'm telling you, there's more down there than anyone knows." Silence. Then, by the end of the week, "I promise." Ella backed away slowly, heart pounding. She didn't need more proof. She had all the confirmation she could stand. Bianca was after something inside that chest. Something old. Something dangerous. And if they didn't stop her soon, it would be too late. The next day, Dev returned with a new plan. "We need to catch her in the act," he said. "We leave the door unlocked, rig the staircase with a pressure sensor and a motion-triggered camera. I've got a small one that won't be detected." "What about the chest?" Iris asked. "We leave it," Dev said. "Let her open it. If she does, she'll show her hand." "Won't that be dangerous?" Ella asked. "Yes," Dev replied, "but it's also the only way to get the kind of proof Julian and the authorities can't ignore." Iris hesitated, then gave a slow nod. "Then we prepare." That afternoon, they worked together. Ella helped Dev set up the sensors, one just beneath the third step from the top, the other hidden in the molding along the back wall. The camera was tucked behind a dusty sconce and linked directly to Dev's laptop upstairs. By evening, everything was in place. Now they waited. But Ella couldn't stop thinking about the chest, about what was inside. Not just valuables, not just secrets. She had a feeling, deep in her bones, that it wasn't gold Bianca wanted. It was the truth. The kind that ruins families. The kind people would kill to bury. That night, Ella stared out her window as fog returned to the grounds, blanketing the house once again in silence. But this time, she wasn't afraid. This time, she was listening. And ready. The night was thick with silence, a silence that had weight, like a velvet curtain draped over the house. Ella lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, counting each second between the creaks and groans of the old beams above her. She didn't need the clock to tell her it was past midnight. Her instincts were stronger than timepieces. Tonight, she didn't just hear the house. She felt it. Felt its anticipation, its warning. She slipped from bed and padded barefoot down the hallway, the motion sensor in the corner of the stairwell catching a faint glimmer of her passing silhouette. The library door was closed, but the hallway held a chill that didn't belong to the weather. Ella paused. A soft hum reached her ears, the kind of mechanical purr she now recognized from Dev's equipment. Someone was inside. She pressed herself to the wall and waited. Then came the whisper of footsteps beyond the door. She heard a faint rustling of papers, the metallic slide of something being inserted into a lock. The chest. Bianca had returned. Ella didn't hesitate. She turned and sprinted down the hall to Dev's temporary setup in the unused study. He had stayed the night in one of the guest rooms, just in case. The moment she pushed open the door, he looked up from his laptop, his expression immediately alert. "She's in," Ella said breathlessly. Dev tapped a few keys. The feed from the motion-triggered camera flickered onto the screen, illuminating the secret room in black and white grain. There she was, Bianca, kneeling beside the chest, her hair tied back, her hands moving quickly as she inserted a sleek tool into the star-shaped lock. "She brought her own tech," Dev muttered. "That's not an ordinary pick. That's precision engineered." Ella's eyes were fixed on the screen. "She's almost got it." The tumblers clicked. On the screen, the chest creaked open. Bianca paused, staring down into its contents, her face lit by the dim glow of her flashlight. "She's smiling," Ella whispered. Dev frowned. "I'm going down there. I'm coming too." He glanced at her, then nodded. "Stay behind me. No heroics." As they descended the stairs, careful to avoid the creaky spots Ella knew so well, a storm began to build outside, wind pressing against the windows, trees scraping softly against the glass like fingernails. It was as if the whole world outside had turned its gaze inward. They reached the library. The door to the secret stairwell stood slightly ajar. A thin line of light spilled up from below. Dev drew in a breath, then stepped inside. Bianca didn't hear them at first. She was too focused on the chest, rifling through its contents with hurried precision. Papers, photographs, leather-bound journals. She pulled them out one by one, skimming pages, stacking anything that seemed valuable into a sleek black case beside her. She was muttering to herself. "Letters, deeds, there it is, the confession. This is it, this is everything." "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Dev asked, his voice calm, even but razor-sharp. Bianca froze. Then she turned slowly, her flashlight beams sweeping over them. Her face didn't show fear, it showed fury. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice cool and clipped. "Neither of you." "I could say the same," Dev replied. "You've broken into a sealed room, tampered with private property, and are currently handling materials that don't belong to you." "They don't belong to him either," Bianca snapped. "Or his family." Ella stepped forward. "What do you mean?" Bianca's jaw tightened. She looked from Dev to Ella, then back again, as if weighing her options. Finally, she spoke. My great-grandfather was a stonemason. He helped build this house in 1924. His name was Samuel Reed. He died penniless, buried in an unmarked grave because of what happened here. She gestured toward the chest, then to the room itself. This estate was built on lies, theft, blood. The Everett family stole land that didn't belong to them. Bartholomew Everett manipulated documents, forced out his business partner, my ancestor, and had every trace of it buried. Literally. Dev's brow furrowed. This doesn't justify theft. It's not theft if it's reclaiming what was taken, Bianca hissed. This, she lifted a folder, is a signed confession from a crooked lawyer who helped erase my family's name from the records. This is a copy of the original deed. These letters? They prove everything. The Everetts knew, and they kept it hidden, generation after generation. Ella took a cautious step forward. Then why not tell someone? Go to the courts? Bianca laughed, bitter and hollow. Courts listen to power, to money. I'm an outsider. But collectors, they pay in truth, in leverage. This story is worth millions to the right buyer, and with the blueprints, with the physical evidence, this becomes more than history. It becomes capital. Greed isn't justice, Dev said quietly. Bianca's eyes flashed. Neither is silence. For a moment, no one spoke. Only the wind howled above them, rattling the old beams of the house like bones. Then Dev stepped forward. Put the documents down, Bianca. You've made your point, but you've also broken the law. Bianca didn't move. Her fingers tightened around the folder. I can't let this die here, she said. You don't understand. My entire life has been shaped by this lie. This is all I have. You have your story, Ella said softly. You have the truth. But if you take that out of this house the wrong way, no one will ever listen to it. You'll be dismissed as a thief, and the truth will be buried again. Just like your great-grandfather. Bianca looked at her, and something in her face flickered. A trace of doubt. Regret, maybe, but it was short-lived. No, she said, I've come too far. She turned, lunging for the black case. Dev was faster. He stepped in, grabbing the handle, trying to pull it away. The case spilled open, papers fluttering like wounded birds. One photograph drifted down between them, an image of a young man in a work apron standing beside a foundation trench. Bianca gasped. Ella bent down and picked it up. This is him? She asked. Bianca nodded slowly, her voice breaking. Samuel. He was 25. They told his family he ran off. Said he was a drunk. But he never drank. He was proud. He was honest. They covered it all up. Ella felt something sharp twist inside her. She looked at the photograph again, then at Bianca. We're not trying to erase him, she said. We're trying to understand. Bianca looked exhausted. Her hands trembled as she reached out, taking the photo from Ella with reverence. Dev backed away slightly, giving her space. The tension broke when footsteps thundered down the stairs behind them. Julian. He appeared in the doorway, his expression a storm of confusion and fury. What's going on? Dev straightened. We caught her in the act, but it's more complicated than we thought. Julian's eyes fell on Bianca, on the open chest, the scattered documents. His face went pale. What are these? He asked. Bianca didn't answer. She stood frozen, the photograph clutched to her chest. Ella stepped forward. They're the truth, she said. About your great-grandfather. About what he did. Julian stared at her. What are you saying? She took a deep breath. This house was built on stolen land, and someone died because of it. Someone who never got to tell his side of the story. Silence fell again, this time heavier. Julian looked at the walls, at the bloodstains, at the broken chest. And then, slowly he knelt, gathering the papers. Then we tell it, he said quietly. The whole thing. No more secrets. Bianca's lips parted, but no sound came. Julian turned to her. If you help us present this properly, if you let the truth come out without selling it, you'll have your justice. Not the kind you steal, the kind you fight for. For the first time, Bianca's shoulders slumped. She dropped her gaze. I just wanted them to know, she whispered, that he mattered. They will, Ella promised, because now we do too. They left the chamber together, slowly, carefully, carrying the evidence not as loot but as memory, as penance, as truth. And above them, the house creaked, not in warning, but in relief. The day after Bianca was discovered in the underground chamber, the Everett house was quieter than usual, but it wasn't the heavy, uneasy kind of quiet. It was the kind of silence that followed a storm. the stillness of a house exhaling after a long-held breath. Julian had barely spoken since they returned to the main floor that night. He'd stayed up, reading the confession letter, examining the deeds, sorting through the brittle pages with trembling hands. When Ella had come down for breakfast, she found him still in the library, slumped in the big leather chair with a stack of documents in his lap and exhaustion stamped across his features. He looked up at her as she entered, and for the first time since they'd met, there was no practiced politeness in his eyes. Just truth, raw and startled. "She was right," he said quietly, "about everything." Ella nodded and took a seat across from him. "Now what?" Julian didn't answer at first. He placed the confession letter gently on the table between them and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, as if the weight of his family's history had finally settled onto his shoulders. "Now we clean up what should have been faced a century ago." Bianca hadn't been arrested. Julian had made the decision to press pause, at least for now. He wanted answers before accusations. And, perhaps more than anything, he wanted to understand the truth behind the foundation his family name had been built on. That afternoon, Iris returned. She wore gloves and a thick scarf, despite the late spring warmth. When she entered the library and saw the open folders on the table, she didn't gasp or speak. She simply moved to Julian's side, placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "I knew." He turned to her slowly. "I didn't know the details," Iris clarified. "But I've always felt it, this house carrying something dark beneath its beauty. A wrong never acknowledged, a life never mourned." Ella watched them, saying nothing. She could see the change in Julian, the shift from businessman to something deeper, someone ready to confront legacy, even if it meant tearing it down brick by brick. That night, Julian made calls, first to his lawyers, then to the local historical society, and finally to a law firm that specialized in inheritance disputes. Ella overheard enough to know that he wasn't trying to keep the secrets hidden. He was trying to bring them into the light. Bianca returned the next day, not with tools or lies or forced smiles, but with a manila envelope under her arm and circles beneath her eyes. "I'm not here to fight," she said at the doorway. "Just to return the last set of documents. I took them when I left. I shouldn't have." Julian nodded solemnly. "Come in." She stepped into the library, but her posture was different now. No longer defiant, no longer calculating. She looked like someone who'd been holding a burden too long and finally realized it was crushing her. "I read the confession again," she said softly, "and the letters. My great-grandfather wasn't just cheated, he tried to stop it, tried to make it right, and they killed him for it." Julian swallowed hard. They buried him in the very foundation he helped build. There was a long pause. "Then I want him out," Bianca said, her voice trembling. "I want him out of that place. I want him named, remembered." Julian didn't hesitate. "We'll give him a proper burial. With a headstone, with his name carved in stone. And the story, we won't hide it." Bianca blinked quickly, but didn't look away. "I'll help you tell it," she said. "Not as a weapon, just as the truth." And so the strange alliance began. Julian hired a forensic team, excavation experts, an independent historian. For 2 days, the estate buzzed with quiet professionals. Ella watched as the old foundation was carefully uncovered, as the underground room was re-examined with fresh eyes and respectful silence. On the 3rd day, they found the remains. A skeleton, curled in on itself, partially buried beneath a layer of stone that had once been a wall. Samuel Reed. It wasn't just a recovery, it was a reckoning. Julian was there when they lifted the bones. So was Bianca. So was Iris. And Ella, standing beside them, felt the house shift again. Not in warning, not in fear, but in something close to release. As if the walls had finally been heard. That night, they gathered in the library. Julian, Bianca, Iris, Dev, and Ella. The air smelled faintly of old pages and fresh coffee. Papers lay across the table, evidence and testimony and plans for what came next. Julian looked around the room. "I want to set up a scholarship in his name," he said. "For students in trades, masonry, carpentry, for those who build." Bianca's face softened. He would have liked that. "We'll also petition the county to add a historical marker outside," he continued. "Not to shame my family, but to mark the truth." "And the house?" Iris asked quietly. Julian glanced at her. "It's not mine to keep." She blinked, unsure what he meant. "The records are clear. The land belonged to the Reed family first. The way I see it, you're part of that line. Your grandmother was Samuel's niece. You've cared for this place longer than I've even known it. You should own it." Iris sat back, stunned. "Julian, I never asked for." "You shouldn't have to," he said. Ella watched the exchange, something warm blooming in her chest, not because of the transfer of property, but because of what it represented. For the first time, someone wasn't hiding the truth or burying it deeper. Someone was standing up and saying, "Here, this is yours." In the days that followed, the house changed again. Light felt different through the windows. The air in the hallways no longer pressed down on Ella's shoulders. Even the library, once heavy with history, now felt like it had exhaled. Julian moved into a smaller home nearby. He didn't disappear. He remained a steady presence, picking up Ella from school, helping Iris with paperwork, joining them for dinners around the long table that no longer felt haunted. Bianca didn't stay. She left town quietly, but not before giving Ella something. A small brass compass that had belonged to Samuel. "It doesn't work anymore," she said, placing it in Ella's hands. But he carried it every day while working, said it reminded him to keep going in the right direction, even when the path didn't make sense. Ella clutched it tightly. "Will I see you again?" she asked. Bianca smiled faintly. "Maybe, but you don't need me. You're already heading true north." The underground chamber was sealed permanently a week later. Not hidden, sealed. After Samuel's bones were interred in the local cemetery beneath a stone that read Samuel Reed, Builder, Truth Teller, Lost, Now Found, the room was filled with concrete and sealed behind a commemorative plaque. A ceremony was held. Not large, but meaningful. Iris stood beside the headstone, her hands folded, tears in her eyes. Julian spoke simply. "We cannot undo the harm, but we can make sure it's never hidden again." Ella placed flowers on the grave, a quiet thank you in colors. Afterward, back in the library, she curled into the leather chair and stared at the space where the painting had once hung. It had been replaced with something new, a framed print of Samuel Reed's compass, the same design as the one in her pocket. Underneath, in delicate script, were the words, "Let no truth stay buried." As the sun dipped below the trees, casting golden shadows across the shelves, Ella looked around and felt something deep settle in her chest. Peace, maybe, or purpose. She had uncovered the truth, spoken when no one else would, and now the house could finally rest. But she wasn't finished. She turned to Julian, who sat beside the fireplace with a notebook in his lap. "I want to write about it," she said. "All of it. The truth, the secrets, how we found him." Julian smiled. "I think that's a perfect idea. I want kids to know," she added, "that their voice matters, that even if they're small, they can change big things." Julian reached over and squeezed her hand. "Then write it, Ella. Start tonight." And she did. While the house slept, while the wind whispered gently through the eaves, Ella began the first sentence. It started, of course, with a door. And a voice no one believed, until they did. 3 days after the underground room was sealed and Samuel Reed was laid to rest beneath a headstone that finally bore his name, the Everett estate seemed to breathe more freely. The air inside no longer felt heavy with withheld truths. The hardwood floors didn't creak with the same uneasy groan, and the once ominous quiet of the house now felt like something gentler. An exhale, a pause. Not silence born of secrets, but silence of peace. Still, Ella Monroe watched. She'd learned that truth had a habit of uncoiling in stages. Just because one secret had been brought to light didn't mean others weren't hiding in its shadow. And though Bianca had returned the documents and helped recover Samuel's story, there were too many small details that still gnawed at the corners of Ella's thoughts. The blueprints Bianca had used to locate the underground vault. Where had she gotten them? Why had she been so sure the confession letter was there? Who else knew what had happened? She kept these questions to herself. Mostly. Iris could see the gears turning in Ella's mind one rainy afternoon as they sat in the library, the scent of lemon polish and old books curling in the air like memory. Ella was tracing the outline of Samuel's compass, the one Bianca had given her, on a sheet of paper, trying to match its lines perfectly. "You're still thinking," Iris said gently, setting a cup of tea in front of her. Ella nodded. She didn't act alone. Iris didn't pretend not to understand. "No," she said after a moment, settling beside her. "I don't think she did either." Ella looked up, her eyes sharp. Have you ever heard of the name Vernon Hale? Iris's face stiffened slightly. He was Julian's grandfather's personal attorney, and now he's Julian's as well. Why? Ella reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded sheet of notebook paper. I remembered something. The day we opened the vault, I saw a letterhead, Everett and Hale Legal Trust. That name was on the corner of the confession letter, too. Iris's lips pressed into a tight line. Ella continued, and I heard Bianca on the phone once. He said the safe would be untouched. Who is he? They sat in silence, the clock in the corner ticking steadily. Then Iris stood. I think it's time we ask. That evening, Julian received an unexpected visitor. Vernon Hale arrived just as the sun was beginning to dip behind the evergreens that lined the edge of the estate. He looked immaculate as always, pressed suit, polished shoes, briefcase in hand. But his eyes looked tired in a way that went deeper than fatigue. Julian met him in the front hall with a handshake and a furrowed brow. You didn't call. I thought this was a matter best discussed in person. They entered the study, the door closing with a quiet thud. Ella crept down the hallway seconds later, hiding in the little alcove near the doorframe, just out of sight. She didn't like spying, but when adults whispered and children listened, the truth had a way of revealing itself. I heard about the excavation, Vernon said, his voice as crisp as the pages of a legal brief. The Historical Society reached out. Julian said nothing. Vernon continued. You're planning to transfer the estate title? Julian's tone was firm. It's the right thing to do. Vernon scoffed. It's emotional, sentimental, dangerous. Ella frowned. You don't think Iris deserves it? Julian asked. I think what she deserves is irrelevant. Vernon replied. You're risking the integrity of your family's legacy over the confessions of a long-dead man and the claims of a disgruntled contractor's descendant. Julian's voice sharpened. That man was murdered, and his family buried along with him. Allegedly, Vernon corrected. There is no court judgment, no legal confirmation, just the words of a frightened girl and an unstable woman desperate to rewrite history. Ella flinched. Vernon was talking about her. She pressed closer to the wall. She was right, Julian said. About everything. Vernon paused. Then he sighed as if exasperated by a naive child. Do you have any idea what you're jeopardizing? He asked. You think the public will admire your honesty? You think this won't destroy everything your family built? Julian's voice was quiet, but each word struck like a hammer. I don't care about what they built. I care about what they destroyed. There was a long silence. Then Vernon spoke again, softer now. Julian, we kept the vault off the books for a reason. It wasn't just about theft or inheritance. It was about protecting the people who came after. Your father. You. Your future. Protecting us from what? Julian demanded. Vernon's next words were almost a whisper. From becoming what they were. Ella's stomach dropped. It was true. He'd known. She wanted to burst into the room, throw open the doors and shout the truth for everyone to hear. But something held her back. A stillness. A knowing that this wasn't her moment to speak. She turned and ran. She didn't stop until she reached the kitchen, where Iris was rinsing dishes, humming an old tune that trembled slightly with sadness. He knew, Ella said, breathless. He helped hide it. He was there. Iris turned, a dish towel still in her hands. Vernon? Ella nodded. He wasn't just keeping the secret. He was part of it. Iris closed her eyes. I always suspected. He's always had a stake in the Everett estate. Not just professionally. He's tied to it, in ways even Julian doesn't understand. What do we do? Ella asked. We do what we've always done, Iris said. We tell the truth. The next morning, Julian called a family meeting. It was just 4 of them now. Julian, Iris, Ella, and Dev, who had stayed to help finalize the archival of the documents. Vernon was gone, having left late the previous evening, without so much as a goodbye. Julian stood in the library, the morning sun casting long beams through the tall windows. I've made my decision, he said. He turned to Iris. The house is yours. We're filing the paperwork today. Legally. Officially. You are the owner of the Everett estate. Iris's breath caught. Julian? No arguments, he said. It's not just about the past. It's about the future. This place should belong to someone who listens, who protects, who tells the truth. He turned to Ella. And I want to thank you. For never giving up, for listening when no one else would, for speaking when it was hardest. Ella looked down, tears blurring the edge of her vision. I just wanted them to be remembered. They will be, Julian promised. That evening, Ella sat on the porch, the compass in her hand, spinning it slowly with her thumb. The wind carried the scent of lilacs and fresh-cut grass. The house behind her was quiet, but it didn't feel watchful anymore. It felt warm, safe. She turned to Dev, who had come to say goodbye. "Will you visit?" she asked. "Of course," he said. "But you've got this now. You're the keeper of the story." Ella smiled. "I want to help others like me." "Then you will," he said, "because you already are." He walked away down the long gravel driveway, and Ella stayed until the stars began to flicker overhead. Inside, Iris lit a single candle in the library window. A beacon, a promise that this house, once filled with silence and secrets, now stood for something else. Memory, truth, and the courage of a child who refused to be ignored. 6 months passed like pages fluttering in the wind, soft at first, then quicker, until the world around the Everett estate was no longer the same. The official deed transfer had gone through in early September, and for the first time in its century-long life, the estate now bore a new name on its records: Iris Reed Holloway. The name wasn't shouted or plastered on brass plates. It was written in ink, quiet but firm, like everything Iris had ever done. She still dusted the windowsills in the morning, still polished the banisters by hand, and still insisted on baking the cornbread from scratch. But there was something lighter in her steps now. A weight lifted, a legacy reclaimed. Julian Everett had moved into a modest but beautiful home 2 miles down the road. Not out of guilt, though that had played a part, but out of respect. He wanted the house to breathe again under the care of someone who had always heard it speak. He came by most afternoons, usually bringing groceries or new books, and sometimes just a quiet presence on the porch swing beside Ella. He still ran his business, still took investor calls, but something about him had softened. He laughed more now, wore fewer suits. And once, when Iris had asked him to read out loud from an old letter found tucked inside the cover of a forgotten book, he'd choked up halfway through and let Ella finish it. Dev Patel, after finishing the installation of the new home security system, and then reinstalling it again when Iris insisted the blinking lights were too modern, had returned to the city, but not without a promise. "You ever need me," he'd told Ella, pressing a spare tablet into her hands. "You call. Doesn't matter if it's ghosts or greedy developers." Ella had smiled. "Even if it's just me being curious again?" "Especially then." And so the house stood, still, solid, and no longer silent. The library had become the heart of it all, a place of gathering and memory, filled with light in the mornings and warmth in the evenings. The hidden door had been sealed, not erased, but marked, its outline preserved behind protective glass with a small brass plaque that read, "The truth waited here, and someone listened." Ella spent most of her time there, curled up in the big leather chair with a notebook in her lap, writing the story that had changed everything. It hadn't started out as a book. At first, it was just pages, scraps of memory, overheard whispers, fragments of old letters. But eventually, she gave it a title, The Door Beneath the Portrait. And one quiet Saturday morning, she printed out the manuscript and handed it to Iris and Julian without saying a word. They read it over the course of a weekend, taking turns marking passages, crying at different spots, laughing at others. When they finished, Julian hugged her so tightly that the compass in her pocket left a small imprint on her side. "You didn't just write history," he told her. "You rewrote what justice can look like." They submitted the manuscript to a small publishing press in Vermont, known for regional histories. The editor read it in one sitting and called the next morning, her voice hoarse from crying. "I want every child to read this," she said. "Especially the ones who've been told they're too small to matter." By the end of November, advance copies had shipped. By January, it was in classrooms across the state. Ella received letters, hundreds of them, from children she didn't know. "I told my teacher about the kid who hit me, and she listened. My grandpa said I was lying, but then he read your book and apologized. I think I want to be a historian. I didn't know you could be one at 9. She kept every letter in a wooden box beneath the library window, beside the copy of Samuel Reed's compass, now mounted in a glass frame. On days when the world felt too loud or too fast, she opened the box and reread them. But it wasn't just the world that had changed. She had too. One snowy evening in February, Ella sat beside the fireplace, her soft feet tucked under her, watching Iris knit a scarf with hands that moved like they remembered everything. "Do you ever regret opening the door?" Ella asked softly. Iris paused, her needles mid-stitch. "No," she said. "It was always meant to be opened, not by me, maybe, but by someone brave enough to ask why it was sealed in the first place." Ella leaned back against the armchair, the firelight casting flickers across the bookshelf. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't said anything. If I just ignored the clicks, if I hadn't whispered to you that day. Then the house would still be waiting," Iris said, setting the scarf in her lap. "And Samuel would still be buried in silence." A beat passed. The logs shifted in the fireplace. "I still hear things sometimes," Ella said. "Not bad things, just stories the house wants to share. Not secrets anymore, just memories." "That's what houses do when they're finally safe," Iris smiled. "They speak." Julian joined them soon after, a folder under his arm. "I got confirmation," he said. "The county has approved the historical landmark designation, and the local school district wants to bring students here on field trips next fall." "Will they see the vault?" Ella asked. Julian nodded. "The sealed door, the documents we preserved, the photos, all of it." Ella grinned. "Then they'll know. Not just what happened, but that someone listened." Julian looked at her for a long moment, and someone believed. That matters just as much. The next Sunday, as always, Vernon Hale showed up for dinner. He had resigned from the board of Everett and Hale 2 months earlier, claiming exhaustion in the press release. In truth, it had been something quieter, a reckoning he hadn't been ready for, forced upon him by a girl with a notebook and a man who chose truth over inheritance. Vernon never admitted fault directly, but he came every Sunday without fail. He brought fresh bread from the bakery, peeled carrots for Iris, and listened with uncommon patience as Ella recited the newest pages of her next story, a fictional tale about a lighthouse with a voice and a child who spoke whale. On one particular Sunday, after dinner, as the fire crackled and snow fell in soft swirls beyond the windows, Vernon lingered at the doorway with his coat in hand. "Miss Monroe," he said, "may I offer you an apology?" Ella blinked. Vernon Hale had never used her full name before. "I've spent my life reading contracts," he continued, "protecting estates, names, power. I thought I was doing the right thing, but it turns out the paper I trusted wasn't as strong as your voice." Ella stood, surprised, and met his eyes. "I accept your apology," she said, "but I'm not finished yet." He smiled. "I hope not. The world needs more truth-tellers." As he left, the wind picked up, and Ella returned to the library, where Iris and Julian were playing a quiet game of chess. She curled into her favorite chair and opened her new notebook. At the top of the page she wrote, "Some doors open with keys, others with questions." And then she kept writing. The story wasn't over, not really, because the truth never truly ends. It echoes. It passes on, through pages, through hands, through voices brave enough to whisper until they are heard. The house that once carried the weight of secrets now carried the hum of laughter, the murmur of stories being told, the sound of a family forged not by blood but by choice. And outside, beneath the snow, the land rested too, whole again, named, remembered, and finally, at peace. At its heart, the door beneath the portrait is more than a mystery. It's a powerful reminder that truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of finding its voice. Ella's journey teaches us that courage doesn't always look loud or dramatic. Sometimes it looks like a quiet question, a whispered doubt, or a child refusing to be ignored. And sometimes the smallest voices carry the weight of the most important truths. This story is about justice, not the kind written in legal documents, but the kind found in choices, in listening, and in doing the right thing, even when it's uncomfortable. It's about the difference one person can make by simply daring to ask, what if they're wrong? Ella's bravery shows us that being young or overlooked doesn't mean being powerless. In fact, those who are underestimated often see what others miss. We also learn that real family isn't just about shared bloodlines. It's about the people who stand by us, believe in us, and help us tell the stories that matter. And perhaps most importantly, we're reminded that history only heals when we stop hiding it. Where are you watching from? We'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. Drop your city or country in the comments. If you believe in the power of truth, the strength of courage, and the importance of listening to every voice, especially the quiet ones, please consider subscribing to our channel. We share stories that inspire, challenge, and uplift. Don't miss what's coming next. Subscribe now and be part of a community that believes every story matters.